Welcome to the Dr. Raj podcast with Dr. Raj Dasgupta, a show all about educating patients, students, and aspiring doctors about better patient care. Dr. Raj is a quadruple board-certified physician and associate professor at the University of Southern California. He was a co-host of the TNT series Chasing the Cure with Ann Curry, as well as a regular on the TV show The Doctors. And now, here's our show.
Hi, and welcome to the Dr. Raj podcast. And once again, this is not just a podcast about getting medical pearls to pass your board exam. If you want that, I do have my Beyond the Pearls podcast for my med students out there. But the Dr. Raj podcast is about being yourself. It's about being happy. It's about helping others. It's about wellness. And it's about stories that will make you laugh, stories that will make you tear up sometimes. And when I first got the podcast, I said that there will be some media stars on my podcast one day. And today, finally, we have a huge star on our podcast. I'm a little nervous, my fans. I'm a little nervous. But before I introduced, I want to say a little something I kind of prepared in the back of my mind, that my amazing star today is someone that I did watch on TV growing up, even though he doesn't want to talk too much about it.
I'll talk about anything you want, Doctor.
I also watched him on two shows at the same time. And then, I kind of watched him on a little bit of HBO on this show called Entourage that I just loved, and I was bawling my butt off while listening to him. But today, my guest isn't here to talk about his books or his comedy or all the things he does. He actually is here to actually talk about a disease state that's really near and dear to my heart, my wife's heart, because my wife, for those who don't know, is a rheumatologist. And this disease is called scleroderma. So we're going to do a little bit of both. And with that being said, let me introduce Mr. Bob Saget.
Oh my
Things like
God.
that.
That was, how do you follow that? That's amazing. Thank you, Dr. Raj. I am humbled. It's funny, whenever you do that intro, I performed last night at the Comedy Store and I gave someone an intro like that and he was really mad at me. He said, I can't follow that.
Well, I prepared because I think a good host, no matter what you're doing, needs to be prepared. So look at this. I dorked it out. I have typed up stuff here. So Bob, the routine of the show is going to be, we're going to do the meet and greet to see if you actually like me or not, and I get to know you.
Right.
And then after that,
that's already happened.
Then after that, we're going to actually talk about what scleroderma is and go from there. So, are you ready?
Oh yeah, I'm born ready. Yes.
So before I give you the question, a little background so you can see why I'm asking you this, is that after I finished my sleep fellowship in Detroit, I moved to Philadelphia because my wife did her room fellowship at Penn, which is an amazing hospital, does many amazing things for scleroderma patients. And I lived in the Philadelphia area for 2 years, and the hospital that hired me was Abington Hospital.
Oh my, I had my hand sewn up there.
And I think there was more that happened around there. And Abington is a beautiful city. The hospital is amazing. So my question to you is, how did you like being raised in Philadelphia? How did you love, going to school in the Abington area? And what's your take on that?
My story is interesting because I was born at Einstein Hospital. And then about 4 years old, my dad was with Food Fair Pantry Pride Supermarkets, which probably went bankrupt when you were little. And then we moved to Norfolk, Virginia, and then I moved to California. So when I was 16, I came back right before the senior year. And Abington High School was just 1 year of my life. But I worked in a deli at Cedarbrook Mall as a deli clerk throughout high school and through college. I lived in my parents' apartment. I am not a child of privilege. And my mother worked at Children's Hospital in Philly. And she was an administrative assistant to a big guy there. And I did a lot of comedy at Penn, quite a bit of it. Yeah, I was a part of it in Harry's Coffee House, which is at the bottom of one of the dorms. And I would get paid in pizza at House of Paganos. So I'm real familiar with your wife's very smart.
In any good interview, you always want to learn about your guests. So of course, I went to Wikipedia. That's where all good people get their information from, So,
Right.
so you can. So my question to you now is, according to Wikipedia, I don't know if you actually read about yourself there. You wanted to be a doctor, but you ended up as so much more, and you make so many people laugh and
Yeah.
happy. Is that true? And are there any regrets? Do you want to go back and really be a doctor?
I'd like to, without any education, do brain surgery. Just do it like a horror film guy. A lot of people have on their T-shirt, "What I really want to do is direct. What I really want to do is brain surgery." And there's one more joke I have to tell you, which is true. When people are making a movie, they go, "Well, at least it's not brain surgery." But making a movie can be hard. So I sometimes think two brain surgeons are working, and one says, "At least we're not making a movie," because it's the opposite. I really wanted to be a doctor, and I went to Temple University, and I had a teacher at Abington who changed my life, really, Elaine Zimmerman. She's no longer with us. She was amazing. And she told me, and this is a joke I've done actually, but it was a real true thing, that she said, "Don't become a doctor, become a comedian and a filmmaker." And the joke was she saved thousands of lives, because it would not have gone well. I couldn't do chemistry. I couldn't do math. I couldn't do bio. So I was pre-med for one semester, and then I switched over to the radio, television, film department at Temple. And then I made films. And ironically, I made a film about my nephew having his face reconstructed called Through Adam's Eyes, and it won the Student Academy Award. And my nephew was 7 at the time, and he narrates the film. It's a short film, black and white, 11 minutes. And I shot it at Children's Hospital, which is where he had all of his surgery. So I have a strong connection to your past life and your wife's.
No, and you actually, I don't know if there's a two-way camera. You read my next question, was what was your motivation for Through Adam's Eyes? Because I did my research, and I was very impressed that, I'm at USC right now, and we have a huge film department, and many people will make, a variety of different films. And to have a film about facial surgery, about what they're going through, I mean, that's pretty mature for someone who ended up on Entourage and all these other really cool shows. So I'm impressed. And I kind of read about it, and I was like, wow, that's deep. So.
Well, it was my background. I started making movies when I was 9 years old, all 8mm, Super 8. Through Adam's Eyes, I was at Temple University, so it was 16. And 16mm, sorry. And that was because I loved my nephew so much, and his story was one that I thought should be told of what a kid goes through. And he had Treacher-Collins syndrome, which is where your parts of your face are pulled down, and there's not enough bones in your nose structure often. And it had the appearance for some people, of Down syndrome, but his brain was fully healthy. And I don't want to say Down syndrome people are not healthy, but he didn't have that element. And so they took ribs out of his chest, and they literally, like the movie Face Off, took his face off and put bones in behind his eyes and in his nose, and built up his face, and built up one of his ears, and put tubes in his ears. And so he went through quite a hardship, and he's amazing today. You'd never know anything. He's an adorable guy. He's a real estate guy and an event planner, and he's got an amazing life.
Wow!
So
no,
it meant a lot to me to make that movie. It was a special thing.
No, it sounds like it. And I'm going to switch gears on asking you about your life, because this was kind of interesting and scary. I'm sure I want to hear the story about it, if there was a good story about it, that you had a gangrenous appendix at one time. And I'm going to tell you, I don't wish appendicitis on anyone. My mom had an appendicitis, and she was vomiting. I had to rush her to the hospital. They had to take it out. She's doing good. Hi, Mom. Love you. Now, they have a gangrenous appendicitis. That doesn't sound good. So what were you doing, and did it get you to the hospital on time? And
well, I should have been at USC where you are, but I was at UCLA, and it was July 4th, ironically.
Really? Okay.
And I was a 22-year-old kid who moved out to LA. I was going to go to USC film grad school. I got in. I went for 3 days, and I quit because the owner of the Comedy Store said, work here for free. And I did, but then they started paying, and I was there for 8 years in touring a country and taking acting classes, doing all I did. So at 22, I'm living in my single apartment in Palms, and because it was a straight shot to USC, that's why I moved there.
Okay.
But then I quit, and I had severe pain, the right lower abdominal pain. And what is it called?
Well, they have a quadrant. So it's like kind of like the right lower quadrant. And there are all these dorky medical words there, but you didn't know that was the appendix at the time, right? Did you think you had just some gastritis or something?
Yes, that's what I usually would think it was, because I always ate bad things. And my girlfriend, who later became my wife, who later became my ex-wife, who is now my friend, took me to the hospital. And she took me to the hospital. And my nephew, I can't remember how I got there. It couldn't have been my nephew. He was a child. So, he was. There's a button. There's a funny ending to it with my nephew being 9 and visiting me in California. I don't know how I got there. Anyway, I got there, and they didn't have a doctor, and they said you have to wait till 7 a.m. I said, but I'm in severe pain, and it is the worst pain I've ever been through in my life. And as you know, we don't remember pain, but we can remember that it was the worst pain of our life. And they said that it's up there with childbirth, that it can be that bad. So they put ice packs on me for 7 to 8 hours and left me for dead, not even thinking. I don't think it had perforated until later in the morning. I think I was going to be just a routine appendicitis. And then the doctor finally showed up. They finally did the surgery, and it perforated. And I was very fortunate that the gangrene didn't hit my abdomen, because I obviously could have died.
Yeah.
And they had to put me in a private room, and they were a little scared that I was going to sue them, I think, because they shouldn't have done that. They should have awakened the doctor and gotten him there. Sorry about his cushy life, and operated on me. And it was so bad that they couldn't sew it up. So I had to stuff it with a Q-tip and gauze for about 4 months, an open wound. And it was like Civil War stuff. You can't mention Civil War these days. It has a whole different meaning, but it was like,
it does.
It's 200 years ago work, or, how they would take care of somebody. And so I would stuff it with gauze and then have to redo the dressing myself.
Oh, geez.
And now I don't think they would do that. They would probably clean it out, cauterize, do whatever, but they kept me. And today it looks a little bit like you could do that with it, It's not. From here, I'm going to Pilates to try again to get that appendix scar. They never closed it up, so it closed up by itself. So that took months, and that was there's a lot of times my family could have sued hospitals, and we chose not to, because I wasn't a suing family. But now I'm in show business, so now all bets are off. But it was pretty scary, and people should be aware of it when there's lower right quadrant pain. That could be one of the things, right?
Yeah. Well,
what else could it be?
She was in her late 70s, kind of mid 70s, and I'm like, I don't think she's going to get an appendicitis now, and it was just maybe some old chicken or something. But yeah, it's scary, and you had to go to the operating room relatively quickly. They didn't give her the Bob Saget ice pack treatment for 7 hours. I'll tell you that much.
What else could it be when a person gets that pain there?
Well, number one, it depends if you're male or female. If you're going to be a woman, of course, you think about the ovaries. Right. There are other things it could be. If you're in reproductive age, you always think about ectopic pregnancy. Now you're making me dorky medicine.
No, you're answering a question I think people need to know.
And sometimes, even though we memorize in textbooks that the right lower quadrant's where the appendix is, and there's something called McBurney's point tenderness, it always can mimic. And some people get left-sided abdominal pain, some get abdominal pain right in the middle. So I think the important thing is, go to the doctor right away. You don't want a gangrenous appendix. And if someone says ice packs and sit overnight, maybe you should call me or Bob. We could help you out,
I'll take the call.
I'm going to switch things up because I purposely picked all these different questions from around. So here's a question I want to ask you. That I was really lucky to dabble, and I just mean dabble a little bit in the media world, and it is hard. And sometimes it does feel like it's brain surgery, and it takes a lot of time and commitment. And I just want to know if you could jump in your DeLorean and go back in the time machine when you're doing two super huge TV shows at the same time. And I'll say the names. It was America's Funniest Home Videos and Full House. How is that possible? And did you sleep at all?
I didn't sleep, but I was also very fortunate because the tree opened up, and they were both accidents. The shows. I'm not. That's not a critique. I was in New York on a CBS show. I was the first choice for the part on Full House, but I wasn't available, and then I got fired from the CBS show. Yeah, and so I became available. My manager called the producer, Jeff Franklin of Full House, and said he's available. And then we started the show with me on it instead of another actor, which I felt bad about and still do to this day, actually. Okay. And then I did the show, and it didn't do well. Full House didn't do well for 3 or 4 years. It did really badly. Oh. And these days, ABC would have pulled it. They wouldn't have left it on for more than 1 or 2 episodes. They would have gone, what is this? And that's how it became this world. And that's why streamers are cool, because they kind of, if you make 10, they'll air 10, But with the networks, there's too much at stake financially now. And I don't think people really follow their gut all the time on, I love this show. And that's what Bob Iger did with this show. And Bob Iger is, he runs all of the Disney company, and he's a wonderful guy. Started my career, and Ted Harbert was the president at the time, and Bob was, I guess, the CEO. I'm trying to remember. And so they kept Full House on the air, and they would even run it twice a week. And then after 1 year of it, they needed a host for this video show they were going to do a pilot of, and we did a pilot. They found me. Vinda Bona and a guy named Steve Pasquet found me on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. I was narrating my wedding videos. And they thought, oh, this is the perfect guy to host a show about videos. So I did it. I did the pilot. Pilot beat a 60 Minutes rerun. And then they picked that up. So it was all accidental. It wasn't like, oh, I got to get this show or something. And most of the good things in my career and life have been that way. They just happened organically. And the things that sometimes I'm passionate about, you just have to push a little harder if you really, really are passionate. But that's how those started. And, I'm a working person. I'm a hard worker. So, I was a deli clerk during college, So I had a strong work ethic. My dad taught it to me. He always worked. I always work. I'm always working. So I take time off once in a while. You're always working, right?
Well, yeah, it comes with the territory. You know what I mean? If you want to kind of try your best to help people and do stuff like this and do other things, you can't complain, or else, don't get into that field. So I agree.
And you're lucky because you have the facility to do it. Your wife is also must be amazing to be able to. Being a rheumatologist is really hard. I don't know. People really don't appreciate that field enough. And it's right now, especially with COVID, it's been the field. It's been where a lot of people turn to save their lives, because we'll get into all that with lung stuff. Yeah. But I was just, if I'm given a task, the hardest thing to do is direct a movie. So that's like the most fun. That's my most fun job. But right now it's stand up, because I'm going to do a new special. So I'm out touring hardcore. But making people laugh right now is, I'm so Norman Cousins on this thing right now. I am so motivated, and I haven't been this excited to do stand-ups and make people laugh since 1995. That's how crazy this is. That's where my life was changing, and I was directing more and not on camera as much. Off camera is what I enjoyed. But this is right out in front, making people laugh. And because I've been doing it over 40 years, I know how to do it. So,
and you do a great job at it. I'll say that much.
So it's subjective.
And now, I really think you're cheating, Bob, because my question number 6 says, what do you like doing the most? And I put TV or director or stand up, but we must have a connection because I think we're playing off each other really well.
I think it's also we have good Wi-Fi today.
Probably. Thanks, Chris. So, no, I think that that makes sense. I think that we definitely need laughter at this point. I think that is that the answer for right now? Is that being super pumped up, doing your tour, making people just kind of like give them a little appendicitis when you're laughing? Is that the main thing?
Yeah, yes, I don't want to drive them to the hospital, but if I'm in a place where people can drink, I'm not helping. I'm enabling. So I just did some shows. I was opening up so many venues that were closed. Atlantic City, I opened the Hard Rock.
Oh, cool.
The Estes Arena.
Yeah.
And, but it was only a seventh of the audience because you couldn't do full capacity. Now
Right.
you can.
Yep.
Then I was in Houston, and that's like full capacity. And, people just want to shoot COVID with a gun,
Well said. Well said. Well, let me kind of bounce off that this question I wanted to ask you. So I kind of thought you were going to answer stand up. So my follow up question is actually, can you just rattle off some people that influenced you in the comedy field, who you admire in the comedy field? Who do you look up to?
Yeah, that's pretty easy. There are people that I got to work with and got to know. And when you get to meet your heroes and they don't disappoint and you get to be friends with them, that's like a dream. So there's people that I looked up to, Richard Pryor, and loved him. And I got to know him from hosting at the Comedy Store forever. And I was in a movie with him about I was a young doctor called Critical Condition.
Oh.
And he was a fake doctor. He was an escaped convict who got into a hospital and pretended he was a doctor. He was an imposter in the movie. And Rodney Dangerfield really liked helping young comedians. I was on his first young comedian special on HBO. Don Rickles, loved him a lot, like a dad, and became close with him. I used to sneak in and watch him at 17 years old.
No way.
In the Latin Casino, which was across in Jersey, right across from Philly. And I saw him open for Frank Sinatra, and then I saw him headline there himself. And I mean, there's a lot of people that I look up to, many that I've met. And I met a couple that were hugely disappointing. And then I met others that I got to know, like Bob Newhart and Norman Lear, who is a magical 98-and-a-half-year-old man who's one of the smartest people any of us could ever know, who changed television. And I just talked about this because there's a CNN series coming on about sitcoms. And I'm in it. Bill Carter interviewed me, and I'm actually on with Jake Tapper Friday or next, I don't know when it is, soon. And we talked about it, about the fact that I was watching All in the Family being filmed, Norman Lear doing the warm-up, and I would watch All in the Family and Sanford and Son and the Jeffersons. I was there. I was a teenager in LA, and I wasn't even supposed to be there, but I was tall. And I know Norman Lear, we get together and smoke cigars, wow. 98.5. So, right. Your wife might say, hey, I don't know about that, but he's 98.5. Comedians and cigars, or geniuses and cigars, sometimes if you don't inhale. I would love to know your wife's opinion.
Well, I mean, let me just, I'm a big movie guy on top of medicine. And some of the comedians you just mentioned, I just want to say, I grew up with Back to School with Rodney Dangerfield. And this is not Richard Pryor's best movie, but I love Brewster's Million. That's the one I grew up with at my age. I was bawling.
Silver Streak.
Yep.
I mean, Stir Crazy.
I love Stir Crazy. Gene Wilder is amazing. Oh.
Yeah, the two of them together.
Yeah.
And Richard's stand-up is kind of helped change. Lenny Bruce changed things, and Richard Pryor changed things. And a lot of that stuff, people aren't, they want to cancel a lot of that kind of stuff. And I don't disagree because things have changed. But Richard Pryor's viewpoint holds up to this day, I think. Funny is funny. It's just the times change, and what people, we have to change with the world changing. So I'm definitely aware of that. Me being known as a I guess, Jake Tapper called me a gritty comedian.
Gritty.
So that's
Okay.
gritty, which means I can do family stuff. It's not a problem. I like acting. I love being on Full House. It's just stand-up is a different love of mine that it's like switching gears completely. So, but my friends now are some of the best comedians that have ever lived. And it's Dave Chappelle and Bill Burr. And these are very, very special people.
They are.
They're pretty brilliant at what they're doing. And they're just going to become the new Mount Rushmore, and who wouldn't be here without the other people we mentioned.
And before I switch gears, I will say Dave Chappelle is probably my wife's favorite comedian.
Yeah.
And before we go to bed, we watch him on Netflix sometimes. So he is the classic show. He's amazing. Now I'm going to switch gears here. I'm always looking at the time, looking at you, or right in that halfway point. And I do want to talk now about scleroderma and start off with the general question. Why are you so passionate about scleroderma? And how do you explain scleroderma to the public? Meaning that when you talk to all your star friends, like, hey, why are you promoting this? What is scleroderma? How would you explain it? And I may jump in and throw a couple things out.
Absolutely. Well, fortunately, I'm on the board of the Scleroderma Research Foundation. And so our chairman, Dr. Luke Evnen, has scleroderma. And so a few of our board members do as well. And we have an amazing scientific advisory board. If I told you the names, you'd go, or if you looked at our website, you'd go, whoa.
I did.
Yeah, they're good doctors.
Yes.
And so they do most of the medical speak for me. But in my layman's terms, I came to know it because my sister, Gay was her name, and she, we don't know what she had in 1991. We couldn't figure it out. She was sick for about 2 to 3 years. It was a pretty quick digression. And I did a movie about it where I reenacted what happened to her, which was doctors going, oh, you have mental problems. Oh, you have lupus. Oh, you have Epstein-Barr. Oh, SALT, whatever. And they found they didn't have like the nail test where you can detect, or a blood test. Right. You do the nail of people. She had Raynaud's arthritis where her fingertips and her toes were blackening at the tips. But they still didn't diagnose it. And they were guinea pigging her with cortisone and prednisone, which sometimes does help open up the lungs, but at a certain point, it doesn't. And it can, as you know, make your brain futile if you stay on that stuff, high doses. So she had to come to LA and live with my parents. She really got very sick. And we got her a rheumatologist here in Los Angeles who did not do a good job and was trying his best, but had a little bit of the, I'm sure you've seen it in many doctors, a little bit of a God complex, a little bit. And all he did was guinea pig her and didn't know what to do, I didn't know that there were places like Johns Hopkins, and you said USC has a great center, that there are centers of excellence that the Scleroderma Research Foundation funds that have 3,000 patients that do test trials. And where we're at today is because of what she didn't get the treatment of. And so she progressed, and within 2 years, she was gone. And I was doing the benefit. I started doing the benefit, I think, in 87, 86. And so it's over 30 years. And we raised over $55 million for research. And so when famous people, they all know about it now because they've all had to do the benefit, all the comedians, all the musicians, all the different people that have given so much over these years. Pretty much every comedian has done it. And I've been spearheading it and wanting to help people who I know a young girl, Sophie Ann, she's 10 with scleroderma. And the symptoms, many things happen. With my sister, it looked good for a while because your face gets taut. So it looks like because I understand it's too much collagen, and you would think the opposite because logically, oh no, you should have more elasticity. It's the opposite. And the teeth start to be more pronounced because the lips kind of go away. And the esophagus, that's when they have patients have trouble swallowing. And,
yes.
And then she passed away from it, but a lot of patients pass away because she has systemic scleroderma, and it was pulmonary hypertension, which is the lungs atrophied and didn't work
Yeah.
anymore. And they really, it was sad, but they took out her gallbladder. They did photophoresis or whatever it's called. And they did many
Yeah.
things to her. Some were applicable and made sense. And then we didn't know what we were doing. We're just going to save her. And now, we fund a lot of centers of excellence. It's all about to come out, actually, because we've totally revamped everything we've done, and our website and our world. We have a Conquer registry, which allows patients to be registered and then be able to participate in test trials at a hospital near them. I would think USC's on the list. I'm not sure, but I'll bring it up after this for sure. But it's it's just about us giving money to help fund these. And they give, what they're able to do with scleroderma now that they couldn't do for my sister is, as I'm sure your wife would say, is there are new cocktails and new medications, brand new ones by companies like Actelion, and I would mention Johnson & Johnson, but they're having a rough month again. You can't even buy their baby powder without trouble right now. I think there's chrome in it, but no, I'm kidding. I love the company, but it's. Would she be alive today? Maybe. Had that happened, had the medical treatments been available.
Well, let me ask you this. It's amazing. You're just going through all my questions about Gay and how she presented. But let me ask you my first question, which was, when she first had some signs of scleroderma, and for my listeners over today, how do I categorize scleroderma? I put them into two broad categories: localized, where some people may only get the skin findings, nothing in the internal organs, or individuals who get what we call systemic sclerosis. And, many doctors will divide that into two types: a limited or a diffuse. And you're just throwing so many medical words out there, Bob. You're like a doctor itself.
Well, it's 38 years. I don't know how many years I've been doing it, but osmosis, because I'm a numbskull. I can't remember anything.
You're not, dude. I can tell you already, the way you throw these words correctly, I'm impressed. And just for everyone listening, scleroderma is more than just, hey, my skin's involved. It's about the organs inside, and it could affect almost every organ. So do you remember what your sister's first complaint was? Was it maybe this rainouts? Was it difficulty swallowing? Was it shortness of breath? Do you remember?
Yeah, I really do. And it's the same in most patients I've talked to. It's body pain. It's just, it's fatigue and severe pain. So it's almost, this is the sickest version of it. It's like American Werewolf in London when he turns into, or Wolverine when someone transforms. Yeah. It's a slow progression that this disease, and it takes on a physical attribute. And it's also been, there's a lot of conjecture. They call it an autoimmune disease, which it is, but it also has so many different forms. And I know from doctors I've talked to, and one is a Nobel Prize laureate. I can't remember his name, but I have his card. It's very heavy and big, and so is his cranium, very oversized cranium. But he said that it's also I'm doing a vascular disease. So it's often a blood disease of the blood, and then from what he told me, and then of course it's autoimmune also, and then I have friends that are not with us that had cancer also, and it taps onto it, much like we've heard of the COVID cases where, my grandmother had cancer, but then she got COVID, and then it just triple complicated everything. We want to get it into the stage where and we're almost there. We kind of are there with cancer, where your chances are better than they've ever been. With treatments, they're not easy treatments. I mean, cancer is probably the hardest. Chemo and radiation is the hardest of all treatments.
Of course.
But with this, it's not that painful. It's really just different meds, and also doing healthy things for yourself. You keep your extremities warm, normal things like that can't eat or drink certain things, although I know people that they drink more. But it is, interestingly enough, and I'm sure you know this and your wife knows this, not unlike COVID, when a person of African descent gets scleroderma, it affects them at a much faster pace and a much more difficult case than a person who is not of African descent. So it's the numbers are interesting, that how it affects different people of different pigmentation.
And let me go medical here, is that, the thing about rheumatology that's so tough is that many of your diseases are not common, and then on top of scleroderma, there are individuals that will have scleroderma with no skin findings whatsoever. That's even 3,000 times hard to diagnose.
Right.
And then I think the hard part, and why I'm so impressed with your foundation, I definitely looked at the website and who's involved, is because there is no magic bullet for scleroderma. Like, here's your pill and I'll cure your scleroderma. We target the symptoms, the organs that are going to be involved, and you're right. And, I wish for people's Raynaud's, I wish everyone could move to LA and live here in Southern California. And it's tough.
Because the fires will warm you up.
Yeah. And I wanted to go back and just ask, you already said that it wasn't like, here's a slam dunk diagnosis. I mean, how many doctors did you take your sister to? And you did mention lupus. You mentioned mono, which is EBV. Did I miss anything out there? Were those the two big ones that she got misdiagnosed for? And how many doctors did you go through?
Psychosomatic. They went on a mental health route. Really? And that was, to me, the most insulting. That was because she was a neurotic person, but she was also an amazing, brilliant woman and a teacher, and many students' favorite teacher of their whole lives. I hear from them today. People tell me what an amazing person. And nobody deserves this. Nobody deserves to be in this pain. And at the end of her life, I was there with her, and she was saying, "Help me." And I said, I am. And I had to do that horrible thing you don't want to do in hospice, which turns into hospice quickly. And she doesn't have time to process it because she was so terrified, and they had her on the wrong meds. And then finally they just gave her morphine, which was, at least she had a little bit of peace, but they didn't stop the prednisones. I'm going to really tell you about something I could have sued about. There was a doc. He's not alive. The doctor's not alive. So what happened was, and I won't say his name because I don't know. I'm not that kind of person.
Okay.
So she was getting released from the hospital to go to my parents. He said, "We've done all we can do right now. You know what hospitals have to do. So they load you with meds and then send you home." What they did was, you're not going to believe this. Your wife is going to go, "What?" They gave her, before she left the hospital at 8 a.m, I was picking her up at noon. They gave her 1,000 milligram prednisone drip. 1,000 milligram drip.
That's
she gets in the car.
She's
off the rails. I'm fine. Everything's fine now. I feel great. And I'm like, oh no, what did they do? And I got her to my parents, and they lived in the valley. And by 2:00, they said, "We've got a problem." And by 5:00, an ambulance came, and they took her to a hospital in the valley because her whole body was shutting down, and she was having a psychotic episode and cursing like The Exorcist. And then they had to put her down at the hospital, not put her down, but knock her out.
Yeah.
And keep her overnight and flush her system to get rid of this poison that they had put in her body. So instead of helping her, they just throw more drugs at you. But the amount they gave, that's, I think that probably would have held up in court, but then it wouldn't have, because there was no, I would need to get a major scientist to sit down and go, this is really bad for this person. And who wants to go through that legal case? And look at what we're doing in the world today with legal cases. And somebody goes, "Here's all the evidence." I'm sorry, that's not enough for me. But that's where we were at. And then 2 years later, she passed in 94. And in 96, I made a television movie called For Hope for ABC. Bob Iger again, and Ted Harbert again, who put me on Full House, allowed me to make this movie, direct it, and executive produce it along with my friend Brad Gray and Bernie Burlstein. And it was about Dana Delaney played someone loosely based on my sister, and loosely pretty much, spot on our family. And we tried to get the word out on scleroderma. Went on Oprah with Sharon Monsky, the founder of the Scleroderma Research Foundation, who's a whole other episode for you. She was quite a great, amazing spitfire of a woman who was one of my dearest friends. So it kind of put a mirror up to my life. And Oprah said to me during a commercial break, "This is going to change your life. It's going to mess it up." She didn't use that word. And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "You'll see. Because when you do something autobiographical, whether it be a book, but if it's a movie and a television movie, and at that time, ABC was a big share of the market, and we beat everybody in the ratings, and it changed life. I went through I guess my third of 400 midlife crises, but it was, it helped put the disease on the map, but you can't stop doing it because people don't even know what it is. So,
I'm being nosy again about your sister. It's just, I have patients with scleroderma, and I'm doing this because I want them to listen to this episode so they know they're not alone. And two things. One's more of a statement. In rheumatology, I think that sometimes you feel you could throw steroids at everything. And I definitely 100% agree with you that scleroderma, and I like how you phrased it earlier in our conversation. Hey, sometimes it's okay to give a little steroid, but that's usually not a disease that you blast with steroids for a bunch of reasons. And for my med students listening today, there's something called scleroderma renal crisis, and it can be potentiated by giving steroids. And, 20 milligrams of prednisone is 20 milligrams too much. And as soon as you start someone on steroids, you got to get them off, because you start off with one disease called scleroderma, then you'll end up with another disease called steroid toxicity. I guarantee it, But my question for you, Bob, and sorry for going on that side note, is...
No, I appreciate that side note. I hadn't heard that, and it makes complete sense because that's what happened to her.
I'm the lung doctor, and people always ask, why are you passionate about rheumatological disease? It's because it affects the lungs quite a bit. And most of my scleroderma patients sees me for lunging issues. There's two main ones. And I wanted to know if if Gay had either of these. One is called pulmonary fibrosis, and the other is called pulmonary arterial hypertension. And these are both very severe. And I think you did mention it, but I'm going to ask you again. Did she have any one of those?
Pulmonary arterial hypertension, or PA, as we call it. I actually know about it, and that was when she was doomed, and that happens to a lot of patients. And I have a dear friend who's a board member who lost her mom, and we got her to one of the better doctors, Fred Wigley. He's kind of, and Carol Black is in England. So he's one of the people that's one of the main people that's seen the most at Johns Hopkins. But everyone is working on it now because it's more prevalent. I know that you guys are working on it at USC because I always talk to somebody, maybe I'm the poster boy, but people are saying, "Oh, my aunt has it. I just lost my mom to it." Or "My mother's doing well. She's on this program at this hospital." I'm like, that's fantastic.
And when it comes to the lungs, I would say two things. Number one, where we are now in 2021, there are so many more categories of drugs that we use for pulmonary arterial hypertension, PA. And there are also many drugs out there that got FDA approval for the pulmonary fibrosis. And I'm hoping this podcast, me and you being buddies, are going to raise awareness that people with scleroderma, when you start saying, "I have difficulty breathing," push your doctors to find out what therapies are out there, or refer you to an institution that can get you those therapies, because you don't have to suffer. And that's the truth.
No, you don't. You don't. And there is relief. And I see more people getting well now. In many ways, I've talked with our board, we say we've crossed the desert. We're not there, but we've crossed the desert in where we need to go now, because there are literally new medications, CellSap. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
CellSap, of course.
People are loving it, and again, it's not for everybody. Everyone is different. But and Tracleer was another one that was popular for a while. I think some people are still on it. But I've talked to people that do bone marrow transplants, the full on,
Yes.
and it's $1 million or probably $1.5 million today. And they say it cured my scleroderma, and God bless them if that's the case. But I also talk to people that say, well, it did for a couple of years, and then the DNA just replicated itself. So I don't know. For the people that it's worked for, that's pretty damn major, But
Yeah.
people can't afford $1 million. So,
No.
we need to help people on a real level. And that's why the test trials, whether they be at your hospital, whether they be at, we fund Stanford, UCSF, and a lot of hospitals, Houston somewhere, and Hopkins, of course, and they have their own place also. But the key is you don't, when you're doing test trials, it doesn't cost you anything because you're part of the research. And they're your doctors, but they work with your rheumatologist. So you'll go to a center wherever you go, where you find out, and you can find out on our website now. That's the other thing that it's pretty impressive what we've got. We've got some. There's a whole new registry, and people. It's the website is srfcure.org.
Okay.
We're about to get a brand new website, which is which is pretty amazing. So I can't tell you what it is, but it's not hard to figure out. And there are other scleroderma organizations that help people, but ours is only research, but we branched out in terms of trying to help patients and have forums and discussions and this is Scleroderma Awareness Month right now. And
June. We're at the tail end of it, so we squeezed you in there for the last day,
that,
correct?
Right. And it's important. People don't know how to spell it. It's Latin. I wish there was a new name for it, but there won't be. But it's sclero and derma. Derma is skin. I know that. Because there's a thing in my heritage called stuffed derma, which is kishka, which my grandmother would make, and it's gross. It's potato stuffing and chicken fat with tripe, the lining of the cow's stomach, wrapped around it, kind of like a sausage. But it's actually good, but it's really.
It doesn't sound good, Bob. I'm sorry.
I think it clots everything. I think there's nothing in your body it does not clot.
Okay.
It's the number one cause of heart attacks in my family.
Well, let me say a couple of things because, you're just going off the numbers that I wanted to ask you, but you mentioned something I think is very important about scleroderma. It does affect African Americans the most, and they have a really tough course, especially here in the United States. And for those who don't know, gender-wise, women are more affected than men when it comes to scleroderma.
And often in the prime of their lives, in their childbearing years.
Well said. And I think that's one reason why there's another disease out there called sarcoidosis. And I'm one of their champions, and it affects mainly African American women. And I'm very proud, and I wanted to ask you that, is this one of another reason beyond everything else that we need people to step up because we're not raising enough money because they are African American, they are women, and we need to raise this? Is that part of the motivation somewhere in there?
Well, it's interesting. I've been involved with these so long. Before my sister got sick, well, actually, it was right after. It was the year 2000. Sound like a Conan O'Brien sketch from a long time ago. My dear friend Sharon Monsky, who founded the Scleroderma Research Foundation, she was very strong in interviews in People and Wall Street Journal that she believed that it was underfunded and no one cared because it affected mostly women.
Yep.
Period. She said that's why she thought it wasn't that nobody cared. And she didn't have the stats on affecting primarily people of African descent. And then we went to Washington, and it was a different time, different world. And at that time, Hillary Clinton was doing everything she could for women's diseases, all women's diseases. And we were there. And Sharon Monsky got the Women of the Year 2000 award. And we spoke in front of the NIH. Tony Fauci was there, and all the people that people want to have debate over were there. And the people that were trying to do good for disease, that's their ultimate goal. They're not all out to, make a fast buck and sell a book. And it was funny because I gave a speech. I got to introduce Sharon Monsky at this thing with all these biggest scientists in the United States and some out of the country, some from England. And I said, 300,000 people, roughly 300,000 people are affected by scleroderma. And then I stopped. And then I realized, wait a minute, you're giving a fact, Bob. You don't know anything. And then I said to Sharon, who's about to come up, I said, Sharon, is it 300,000 in the United States or in the world? And she said, in the United States. And I said, because we want to make our numbers big. So whether they are or not, and they were big. It's hundreds of thousands. It's impossible to track. They don't have the database, which is what we're trying to do. Someone checks into a hospital, scleroderma goes into the database. We know really for real who's got it. And then at that moment, I said to all of these literal medical geniuses, I said, see, everybody in our business makes up the stats. And I got applause because I was there with people from cystic fibrosis, muscular dystrophy, Parkinson's, everything, every possible disease. And they were all grabbing me afterward and saying, how did you get that? How'd you get this? How'd you get that money? How'd you get this speaking? How did she get this award? And I realized, wow, at every level of humanity, even the people that are noblest, doing their best, they're non-for-profiters trying to get their disease in the light. That's how many people suffer in this world. And they're basically publicists to try to, they're not being mean, but they're competitive because they're trying to shake the tree for their cause. So it's a big world to try to save.
Now, and I definitely want to include this in there. And I know we're going to, at the end, we're going to put all the information. I know Chris is listening about the Scleroderma Research Foundation and all these important facts, but I want to make sure I ask you about something I think that is just awesome what you do, because it combines and exemplifies, your biggest strength, which is making people happy. Tell us about cool comedy, hot cuisine.
Well, that is beautifully phrased. This is what Sharon Monsky came up with years ago, along with her Pitzer roommate. That's a school. And Susan Feniger of the Two Hot Tamales, of Border Grill, Top Chef. She's an amazing person, one of my dearest friends. Also, she's on the board forever from the beginning of the Scleroderma Research Foundation. And what happened was, I don't know what year it was, 1984, something like that. I wasn't involved. She asked Robin Williams, who was a frequent diner in their restaurant, we're going to do a comedy show. Could you possibly come in our restaurant? And I believe the restaurant was Street or City. I always get confused. But it was a small place. They had 150 people. And they had Richard Belzer and Paul Provenza, different comedians performing. And Robin's wife called, Marcia, and said, Robin might go on, but he's coming in. Well, if Robin's coming in to eat dinner, Robin, God rest his soul, he's going on. And so he did. And he was the very first performer of giant proportion to ever do the benefit. And then he did it 7 more times. And so he would always show up and go, what do you need, Chief? And this would be in New York, LA, San Francisco. This is who Robin was. And when you meet people with scleroderma, you kind of don't want to say no. Yeah. You want to help. So it was a comedy benefit. And that's how I met Sharon Monsky. She called me on a cold call and said, hey, do you want to be part of this? And it's amazing food. It's a 5-course meal. It's Susan Feniger cooking. The wines are the best that exist because we have winos on our board. And it's the best comedians that exist. So we would have benefits that Sharon put together with John Candy and Lily Tomlin and just like, these giant, wonderful people. And then I started I took over as host, wasn't on the board yet, but started booking talent booking talent, asking people to help. And so literally everybody was doing it. And I mean, I'll go through the list. I mean, Whoopi Goldberg and we just had Dave Chappelle did it in the last one we could do in LA before the shutdown. And so I had Dave Chappelle was on stage with John Mayer singing and John Stamos doing the auction with me, cool. and Ray Romano and Ken Jeong, and who's a doctor and one of the sweetest people on the planet. We had George Lopez. I mean, Rodney Dangerfield, Gary Shandling, literally Bill Bellamy. I mean, there have been people from the very beginning that say, please always ask me. John Oliver's done it numerous times. Okay. Michael Che did it a few times. He was just on my podcast, and he said that the first time he did it, he was going to wear a Bob Saget T-shirt just to throw me off because he loves practical jokes. Jon Stewart did it. Jerry Seinfeld. It's kind of Cool Comedy Hot Cuisine is our flagship event. We do it in LA, New York, and we were doing it in San Francisco. A lot of towns need repair, and a lot of towns need live events. We were thinking of doing it in the fall again live, but we all decided, I think a smart executive decision, to do a virtual event again. So October 17th, I think it's the first time I'm mentioning it, but we're going to go out with a press release. October 17th will be our next virtual. We did a virtual one last year, and we raised $1.1 million. That's awesome. And to do a virtual event and do that is pretty amazing. With the help of Joe Gallen, who's a television producer forever, and a lot of wonderful, a lot of my friends gave tapes and did things. Joe McHale and Sarah Silverman, and I mean, Stamos was actually hilarious, and Pat Monahan from Train sang, and Kelly Clarkson sang, and John Mayer sang. I mean, it's just the heart of people when they realize what scleroderma is. So Cool Comedy Hot Cuisine it gets irreverent. It gets where people are, I'm in a benefit with sick people in here, and people are cursing and having a good time. And it's always been an incredible party. In LA, I'll invite you. We do it at the Beverly Wilshire in the ballroom.
Everyone heard it. Everyone heard it.
Sure
I'm going to be the first. I'm finally
it's happening.
Invited
it's happening.
To the
It'll be next year, not this year, because it'll be when we're not virtual, and then we'll do it again in New York, and because people are coming back, and as long as we don't have all these variants,
deltas and gammas, so and who knows what Greek alphabet's going to be coming up if we don't get vaccinated, and that's what it comes down to.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, anytime.
Can I ask you a question? So what is the concern between your wife and yourself being in similar fields? I mean, what's the concern with these variants? I mean, if you've been vaccinated, we'd pretty much go, let's just live our lives, but it's not legal. It's not the law to wear a mask, but they're recommending it.
So I think the answer is always going to come down to, what does a virus do? A virus could only replicate when they're in our cells. They're like little parasites, Bob. They can't do anything on their own. They're like little strands of DNA and RNA. And we know that the longer they're hanging out in our cells, they use us, the more times they're going to replicate. The more times you do something over and over again, the more chance of getting a mutation. So what you got to do is get vaccinated, because it doesn't go in our cells and it doesn't mutate, and we won't get these nasty, nasty deltas and gammas and alphas and betas. Who knows what the next alphabet soup is going to be? So my passion is that if there is something that could help people, whether their immune system's intact or not intact, and, stand up for the people who are older, who've done so much for us, I want to do it. And I always tell everyone, there's so many different guidelines out there. Is it CDC or WHO? Never be bullied around. If you feel that you want to wear that mask and be safe, whether you're indoor or outdoor, you do it, because of the fact that I see lung patients. My wife sees patients who have their immune system is just in disarray. And if one jab or two jabs could, help them out, I'm always on that team. So I'm very passionate about it when it comes to helping people and encouraging people to get their vaccines.
I've been saying I get vaccinated 3 times a week. I like it so much.
Now, I want to say a couple more things. So, the cool comedy, hot cuisine is just amazing. And there's so many people that don't even realize when you have a disease that's underdiagnosed, misdiagnosed, when you have a champion out there raising this type of awareness and funds, it's just amazing, because I always believe that these orphan diseases that go under radar, they definitely need a Goliath out there to help them. But I wanted to ask you something. So I'm going to be like the Oprah now. So one thing that I'm very passionate about is writing medical books. And, my wife and I have a book series. And of course, I have it here. It's called Medicine Morning Report, Beyond the Pearls. And my wife, the rheumatologist, has definitely wrote the rheumatology cases. My new my edition of it is coming out soon. Right on the cover, there's someone who has Raynaud's on it. I wanted to know if, number one, if you could write a foreword for us, it would mean so much to me. And number two, I would be honored if we could take a page of the book and dedicate it to GAY and the Scleroderma Research Foundation, because there is a scleroderma case, and it would just mean the world to me to have a champion like you who's passionate about this disease be associated with the book. It goes everywhere to all the medical students.
My God, I'm honored. Thank you. Yeah, it'd be my honor. Just tell me when you need it by.
All right. No, I'll take care of all that. And
wow, you just gave me a gift. Thank you.
No, you're sharing your story. You're helping so many people. When my scleroderma patients found out that you're going to be doing something like this, number one, they didn't believe me. Number two, they get a little teary-eyed, because we don't know people who really are out there who has influence to help disease states out. So it mean a lot. But I wasn't going to do this, but I said that my last question has to be something kind of funny. I don't want to just end on the medical note. So you know where I'm going with this. My question to you, and you could roll your eyes, is Full House ever going to be over? Is it ever going to be done?
It's done. It's done. It'll never go. I don't think it's ever going to go off the air. They did the 6 seasons, really 5, but it was spread out to 6 seasons of Fuller House, where we would show up. The older cast. They called us the legacy cast. They would open up like the chamber on the alien ship where Sigourney Weaver, lets us out of the decompression unit, and we would make our appearances. But I think someone someday will, because the show is what it is and makes people feel so good for generations to come. Because every year, one of our producers, Bob Boyette, said every year a new audience is born for the show. It literally never went off the air. Brady Bunch went off the air, and those are the classics when I was young for kids. Happy Days was always rerunning. But this thing's been on since it went on. So that's 1987. So it has not stopped being on the air. And I don't think it's going to go away, because it is beloved. And I wanted to do a Full House movie where it was a little more PG, where Danny Tanner's just been drinking too much because he can't take it anymore. But I think there might be, I wouldn't be surprised if one day it comes back with a whole new cast and they try to do that. But I don't think you can do that. There were other Star Trek series, but still when those movies came out with the original cast, those 5 or 6 Star Trek movies, it was a big deal. Us Trekkies were pretty excited about it. And I guess the Fullers are pretty excited if anything Full House comes out. I'll play around on TikTok and do something Full House related. Because
no, let me just say the word. No, the show is iconic. Bob Saget, you are iconic, and I know I got to wrap things up. It's already been an hour plus. Everyone, this has been an honor to talk to Bob Saget here. I think this is just amazing. I hope I can't tell you. I think this is going to be, what do you think, Chris? This is our best podcast ever right now. This is going to be number one. So it's good. He set the bar really high right there. And I hope everyone understands the passion that people have towards, diseases that don't get enough attention. I just can't say enough. We're going to put all the show notes in there. And I got to say, I hate to say it, but I'm going to say goodbye for this podcast, for this episode of the Dr. Raj podcast. And I'll see you again in about 2 weeks. Thank you again for being here, Bob.
Thank you, Dr. Raj. Thank you so much. Thanks for the honor. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening. This has been a production of Ars Longa Media. Our producers are Madison Linden and Chris Brightigan. Our executive producer is Dr. Patrick Beeman. This podcast is for educational purposes only and not intended for medical advice. Ars Longa, Vita Brevis.